Okay. Call the meeting to order. It's the regular assembly meeting for February 3rd, 2020. And will the clerk call the roll?
Taylor?
Here.
Chelsea? Here. Bob?
Here.
Jeff?
Here.
Brandy? Here. Jay?
Here.
Mark?
Here. And just before we get started and continue with the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance, I'd like to mention that the governor has canceled his visit today to Petersburg because of weather, and they're going to try to reschedule for as soon in the future as they can. That being said, it's now time for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next item on the agenda, item 3, is approval of minutes from past meetings. The only minutes are from the January 21st meeting of 2020. I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Michie, seconded by Member Borough. There's no changes. All those in favor of accepting them as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Okay, amendment and approval of the meeting agenda today. I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented, or we'll talk about amendments.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
I guess under council or assembly discussion items, some discussion about the Frederick Point East subdivision.
Okay, so I believe there's one item scheduled already. Will I make that item B? Does that work, Clerk Thompson?
Yes.
And will you please remind us?
Yes.
Any other amendments to today's agenda? Member Tremblay.
Yeah, I was late. I was on the phone on the way in with Christ Tompkins about a meeting this evening. If his flight comes in, would that be a discussion item to add? Taking the place of the governor's visit?
Coming in on the jet?
Supposed to be.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe
So
someone
that'll
will
be
make
a
it to town.
discussion item.
Okay, so we'll put that under discussion item, under item C. So if there's no other amendments to the agenda today, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, a motion made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Stanton Gregor. Clerk, call the roll.
Brandy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, the meeting agenda as amended was passed unanimously. Next item on the agenda, item 5, excuse me, is public hearings. And the public hearing, there's only one today, is for ordinance 2020-20-01, an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code, Chapter 14.30, titled Mountain View Manor Elderly Housing and Assisted Living Facility. And this is to increase assisted living rental and service rates and to add a new level 4 of assisted living care. Is there anyone in the audience today that would like to participate in this public hearing? Seeing none, that public hearing is now closed. Bid awards, item 6 on today's agenda, there are none, so that will move us to item 7. And that item is persons that would like to speak with items related to items on today's agenda, or related to today's agenda. Anybody in the audience would like to talk to items on today's agenda? Okay, seeing none, that moves us to item 8, persons to be heard on items unrelated to today's agenda. Is there anybody that would like to speak? Please come forward, state your name and who you represent. I got it. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Assembly members. My name is Candy Woodworth, and I reside at 848 South Mitkoff Highway, and I speak for myself. My previous statements have pretty much been directed to the Assembly. However, today I want to speak to the property owners who live in town within what has been called Service Area 1. We have heard for quite some time that the Assembly is strapped for money to do this or to do that, and we are currently hearing about projects that will require vast amounts of money. I would like you to think about this for a moment. In 2013, the borough was formed, and by doing so, expanded its taxation authority. The city of Petersburg was dissolved, and by doing that, its boundary was removed. The sign was taken down, However, there is this imaginary line that still exists. The borough wrote in its Article 14, the property tax code. Unfortunately, the borough has tied its hands by using the old city limits as its boundary for property taxes. Therefore, you who live in town are bearing the entire burden of property taxes for services. It was 5 mills in 2019. And also, don't forget, you in town are bearing the entire burden of the annual bond debt. That was 2.97 mills in 2019. That's a total of 7.97 mills for you in town. Look to the borough website for this information. You will also see there that the area-wide mill rate of 4.33 for education is for every property. So properties located on the other side of that imaginary line, representing the former city limits, will pay for education only, which is at 4.33 mills. Now, if you haven't driven out Mitkoff Highway lately, you should do so. The lion's share of development in Petersburg is pushing out Mitkoff Highway from 8.5 Mile towards the hatchery. There are many new driveways and homes. That's great for the borough, right? Well, actually, no. The Assembly has not incorporated these areas of development into the property tax structure. Even though these properties receive services, they don't pay for them. I'm submitting into the record, along with my statement, a report by the borough manager entitled Services Provided October 2019. It outlines the services that the area outside Service Area 1 are provided, but are not paid for by their current mill rate. Let me interpret that for you. You, in town, are paying for their services. They are receiving the services free of charge. As one example of this, if you've been following the Assembly expenditures, you will remember that at the December 2nd annual meeting, or Assembly meeting, the manager's report stated that Rock and Road Construction was awarded a contract of $10,000 to provide snow plowing and sanding services on the private roads at Papke's Landing. The cost of these services should be funded by the collection of property taxes from Papke's, just like your in-town snow plowing is paid for by your property taxes. The voter-approved bonds is another problem area. Think about this. Property owners living beyond 8.5 Mile do not help pay for the bond debt. If the Assembly does not correct the property tax code and bring this developed area in, you, in town, will continue to bear the entire tax burden. They will receive the benefits for free. In closing, implementing a fair property tax structure is important for the entire community. It will allow Petersburg Borough to fund the services that are already being provided to the properties outside Service Area 1. Because unanimous support has not been voiced by the Assembly, I urge you to contact the Assembly member with your comments or questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Is there any questions? Okay, anybody else in the audience, excuse me, that has views, persons to be heard on items unrelated to today's agenda? Okay, we'll move on. Board, commission, and committee reports. There are none today. There are no items on the consent agenda. Report of other officers, and we have a report from our auditors, and they're on the phone. So if you'd please proceed.
Well, thank you. Thank you, members of the Assembly, for the opportunity to present today. Just a little background. My name is Sam Thompson. I'm an audit director at BDO in Anchorage. I want to say this is the 9th year I worked on the Borough's audit. Our firm's done the audit for many, many years before then, and we look forward to many more years of continued service to the Borough. So with that, I have probably about 10 to 15 minutes of prepared remarks going over the audit as a whole and the financial statements. If there's any questions at any time, please feel free to interrupt, and I'd be happy to answer those questions as they come in. So first off, I would just like to give a big thank you to Jody Tao and the whole finance department. They did a wonderful job this year as always. They're very well prepared, very responsive to all our questions and requests, and they're just a pleasure to work with. An audit's a two-way street, and the audit only goes as well as the client, and the Borough has always done a fabulous job being ready and being very responsive throughout the entire process. So with that, I'll give a kind of a brief summary of the audit as a whole. So we issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements and the Borough's one major federal program. So an unmodified opinion, it's the highest level of assurance which we can professionally render. So that's the best possible outcome you can ever get from an audit. Now, I will say our opinion is in terms of reasonable assurance, not absolute, in that it's impossible for us to give, our assurance that every single dollar, every single penny in the financial statements is accurate. We work in terms of materiality as governed by our professional standards, and with that, we found the financial statements to be materially correct. We encountered no instances in which we were unable to complete our planned procedures, but our scope of work did not change throughout the audit. All requested documents were provided to us. All our questions were answered in a timely manner. A big part of our audit is looking over the Borough's significant accounting estimates. Now, accounting estimates, those are amounts in which management has a great input or ability to set whatever that number would be. We reviewed the Borough's estimates and found those all to be materially correct and determined in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We did identify a few accounts and did require adjustments in order to be presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We identified 14 corrected misstatements that were made by management. Management agreed to make all these corrections, and they are reflected in the financial statements. There were 4 misstatements that were not corrected by management. Each of these misstatements, and when aggregated together, were determined to be immaterial. As so, the management not making those corrections had no impact on our ability to issue an unmodified opinion. As you are aware, the Borough's financial statements also include the financial balances of both Petersburg School District and Petersburg Medical Center. Now, our firm BDO does audit Petersburg School District, and we did also issue an unmodified opinion over the school district's financial statements. Our firm does not audit Petersburg Medical Center. That audit is done by another accounting firm. And as far as the balances of the medical center being presented in the Borough's financial statements, we offer no opinion on those, and all our basis is based solely on the report provided by those other auditors. Now, we are required to evaluate internal controls over financial reporting. We do not issue an opinion over internal controls over financial reporting. However, we do evaluate them as they relate to our ability to gain assurance over the financial statement balances themselves. And in terms of internal controls, these are the different processes and procedures that the Borough has in place internally to make sure that financial information is being reported correctly on a continued basis. We noted no material weaknesses in internal controls. We did note one significant deficiency. However, management did prepare a corrective action plan, and we are confident that the corrective action plan is factual and that the one deficiency will be corrected by this time next year. Now, if there's any questions at this time, I'd be happy to answer those. If not, I will go into the actual financial statements, which I hope you have in front of you, and we'll discuss some of the key balances for the year.
I don't see any questions from the Assembly members, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you. All right, so in terms of the financial statements, I'll draw your attention to pages 1 through 3. Now, these will be the numerical pages, the numbers at the bottom of the pages, not the actual pages in the printed document. So the first 3 pages is just, again, our independent auditor's report. Now, this is the only part of the financial statements that is property of BDO. The rest of the statements are prepared by management with our assistance, and management takes reliance and responsibility for those statements. So as I mentioned earlier, our opinion, we issued an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance we can provide. So if you could please move forward now to page 20, we'll go over the statement of net position. Now the statement of net position is it's a balance sheet, so it shows the borough's assets, liabilities, and its equity, referred to as net position, as of year end, so as of one day in time, June 30th, 2019. So a few important numbers to point out here. The borough had total assets of $153,900,000. Of those assets, the majority, over $119 million, are comprised of capital assets. When we speak of capital assets, we're talking about land, buildings, equipment, infrastructure. And these are items that cannot be liquidated into cash easily, but they do have value and do have substance and are considered assets. The borough did have $31.9 million of assets in cash and investments, so these would be your current assets or amounts that the borough could liquidate as needed to pay current liabilities. Speaking of liabilities, the borough had total liabilities of $25.97 million. I'll dive a little deeper into the total liabilities number and point out that the borough has just under $11 million of liabilities related to what we refer to as a net pension liability and a net other post-employment benefit liability. And these amounts are broken out on page 21. Now these liabilities are out of the control of the borough. They're determined by the state of Alaska. The Public Employees Retirement System tells the borough their proportionate share of the plan-wide liability related to the borough's participation in PERS. And these amounts will go up and down every year depending on a combination of actuarial assumptions and also investment returns that's recognized by PERS. Again, the borough has no control over these amounts. You're just required under accounting standards to present the numbers provided to you by the state. In terms of a budgetary effect or a cash flow effect, as long as the 22% cap on covered payroll for required PERS contributions stays the same, the borough will be able to budget and predict the cash flow impact of its membership in PERS going forward. If that number were to change, if the state were to get rid of the cap, the amount that you'd have to pay in annually to PERS would jump dramatically. So the last number on page 21 I'll discuss is the net position. You can refer to net position also as equity. So this is what the borough has left after when you take assets less all liabilities. And this amount came out to just over $129 million. And of this amount, $18,497,000 is considered unrestricted net position. So this is net position that's in a spendable form, i.e. it's not tied up in capital assets, and there's also no external restrictions placed upon the amount. So this $18,497,000 represents available equity that the Assembly could use as best seen fit going into the future. Going forward, page 22 and 23 is what we refer to as the statement of activities, and this is a profit and loss statement for the year. Now, it's a governmental profit and loss, so it doesn't resemble anything you'd ever see in the private sector. I will point out, though, that the total change in net position found on page 23 for just the borough itself was a decrease of $519,000, and this is due to pension and OPEB-related expenses as well as depreciation amounts that, when added to your cash outlay type expenditures, exceeded revenues that were brought in. So I will point out, though, on a cash flow basis, backing out those amounts, the borough would have had a positive change in net position for the year. So nothing to be alarmed about there. The borough still has a very healthy total net position and unrestricted net position going into the future. So moving forward, the next few pages are the governmental fund statement, and I'll talk about the general fund. So now the general fund, as you know, is the borough's main operating fund. And on page 24, you'll see the general fund ended the year with just under $4.4 million in unassigned fund balance. The unassigned fund balance is fund balance and has no sort of restrictions or commitments placed on it. And these are amounts that both management and the Assembly can use as they best seem fit going forward. Now this is an increase. If you go to page 26 real quick, you'll see the general fund had a positive increase in fund balance of $718,000 for the year. And a step before that, revenues in the general fund exceeded expenditures by over $1.6 million. So as you can see, the general fund had a very positive year, very profitable. And as you know, the general fund, though, does transfer out quite a bit of money to help subsidize other funds that don't have the strong operating margins that are found. And to go back to discuss the total fund balance amount of $4.4 million, to kind of put that number into perspective, as you'll see on page 26, the general fund had total expenditures of just over $8.7 million for the year. Now, in a sort of doomsday scenario in which the general fund received no additional revenues, if you were to look, you had enough fund balance to last about 6 months without any kind of interruption in your typical operating expenditures. So you have about 6 months stocked away in your rainy day fund and general fund. That's a very healthy margin. There's not a lot of governments throughout Alaska that can say they have that type of resources at their disposal. So I think that speaks to good fiscal management by the Assembly and management over the years, and able to accumulate a strong fund balance margin in case you were to run into situations in where revenues received could not cover current period expenditures. So going forward to page 31, this is the statement of net position for your proprietary or your enterprise funds. I would just like to point out on page 31 that all your enterprise funds have losses from operations, but for the electric, water, wastewater, and harbor funds, if you were to back out depreciation, which is a non-cash item, all those funds would have had positive income from operations. Only the assisted living fund still would have had a loss from operations if excluding depreciation. And as you can see, the majority of these funds, the water fund, harbor fund, and assisted living fund, receive transfers in from the general fund during the year to help subsidize operations and also debt service costs and capital expenditures. So with that, that's the basic statements as we like to refer to them. And the Borough does have quite a few note disclosures, which just provide additional information on the numbers which I just went over. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those at this time.
Okay, we have a question by Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On page 21, under the statement of net positions, under the about 3/4 of the way down the page, it talks about net position. It says 18.497. Equity in what? How is that determined? What's the equity that's determined from?
Okay, so the net position, it's the Borough's assets and deferred outflow of resources, less any liabilities and deferred inflows of resources. So of this $18,497,000, that would be in cash and investments and other assets that you have on page 20 that aren't offset by a liability.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions at this time? You have a question from Member Lynn.
Yeah, let's go to the same page there and go down to the unrestricted. And you show on both the Petersburg School District and on the Medical Center the negative, I think one's 2.6 million and the other one's 4.0 million. What is included in that number?
All right. So the reason why both the school district and the medical center are showing deficits in that position, it's due to having liabilities that exceed their available assets. Primarily, it's due to liabilities that they have related to their participation in PERS and also the teacher retirement system for the school district. If you go about midway up on page 21, you'll see the school district has a $5.2 million net pension liability. The medical center has almost $11.6 million net pension liability. So these are their proportionate shares of the PERS-wide liabilities, and unfortunately, both the school district and the medical center don't have the assets on their books to override these liabilities. So because of that, they're in the end of the day with deficits and unrestricted net position. And I will say it's fairly common throughout the state for school districts to have this negative net position due to participation in PERS and TERS, just because the proportionate share of those liabilities being booked by districts at this point in time is so much greater than assets they have on their books at the end of the year. School districts in particular are limited by the state on available fund balance and assets that they can carry on a go-forward basis. And due to that, you end up with negative or a deficit in net position.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from the Assembly? I don't see any other questions, Mr. Thompson.
All right, well, thank you for your time. Again, we appreciate the opportunity to be of service to the borough. We have a great relationship. Any other questions come up at the end of this meeting or throughout the year, please contact us at any time, and we'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a update on the marine cable, and I believe that will be from Member Lim.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last week, the SEPA staff did a considerable sounding survey on that cable. I'm looking at, if you remember back to what I showed you earlier, related to where those cables lay on the bottom, part of that cable is buried. We were trying to figure out how deep buried. In other words, can we pull it up without stretching it and doing other things? Anyhow, the soundings were done last week. The data's not all back yet that we have. There's still a very strong concern of the staff that we don't have enough cable on hand in order to repair what we need to do. We're still not quite sure. We have, I think, 1,500 feet of cable, and we have about 1,570 feet that goes out, so we're not quite sure there. Or the staff's not quite sure whether we have enough to do the job. Where all the data is going to be crunched, and the board will make a decision on this no later than in our March meeting of which way we're going to go. I think that the crew, at least the staff, I think is leaning towards that we probably need to lay a new cable, because I think that's where they're headed, is my best guess at this point in time.
Okay, thank you for the update, and it's great to be in tune with that situation. Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question for Assemblymember Lynn. So if they order new cable, is the technology improved so much that it would be a total different type of cable? Or how on that?
The cable that's down there we're using now. There's three, I said there was 4 different cables down there. Each one carries one phase. The new cable, they don't make the old cable anymore, so you all know. So the new cable will have all 3 phases and 3 wires in one cable. It will be it. And I talked earlier about the terminals on both ends. My concern was, are we going to have to build new terminals on both ends? The answer is no, that a new cable will be able to splice into our existing one without very much problem.
Cool. All right, thank you.
Member Norheim?
I don't know how the splicing works on these cables, but couldn't you just cut the bad chunk out and just splice in 2 spots, lengthening the cable, or is it not a thing?
That's a good question. Part of the problem is that over the time that's been down there, that cable, the cable that we're having a problem with is the silt is going over top of it. The concern is if we pull it up, we're going to stretch that cable, and since it's that we're going to ruin the cable. That's one of the major concerns with it. If we could pull it up and possibly do what you're talking about, we're looking at that. The other part is the technology to splice the old cable. The only place we found it is in Japan.
Right.
So the mobilization costs would have to come out to do this out of Japan to be able to do this. And so you're looking at probably somewhere between $1 and $2 million just for mobilization on this. To that question is, and then how much? Looking at the risk, we probably have maybe we could have up to 20 more years. We don't know, but the risk is fairly high on that old cable. Best off, when we're looking at is if you're going to have the mobilization costs, lay the new cable.
No.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So, Member Lynn, the new cable, we talked about this a month ago or whatever when you gave us your presentation, has all 3 phases in one cable, which doesn't leave us a spare. So if any one of those legs fail, then we're down. Or can we run an individual? And at some point, I'm just trying to think of a way to have a backup.
I had exactly the same question you have. We're currently we're currently with the old cable, and that's still operational. We would continue to use it. Then we would go to, if something happened to that, if we laid a new cable, we would go with that. But then, you're exactly right. If something happened to the old one, then we'd have to lay another cable in order to have it. We don't have much flexibility there. So my question was to the staff, is would we be better off laying two cables right now if we're going to have the mobilization costs? And I don't have the answer to that question yet. It's a good question.
So we can't use one of the old 3 phases that are still working currently to supplement the new cable if need be?
I asked that question, and the answer was no. I don't understand all the electrical conduits in it, but they're not compatible, is what staff tells me, to be able to do that.
All right, for some reason, it's above their head. All right, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, that brings us to the next item on the agenda, and that is from Member Tremblay on the Alaska Municipal League, Alaska Marine Highway System Advocacy Group report.
Yeah, I just wanted to give feedback since it was a rather unplanned initially trip. There were members of, along with myself, people from Wrangell, Pelican, Haines, Skagway, Angoon, Gustavus, Kodiak, Cordova, Homer, Seldovia, and Unalaska present, organized with the Alaska Municipal League. Broadly, the message was around the urgency behind the request for funds to the Alaska Marine Highway System. We stated that we knew the long-term solutions with the ferry system will take a while to work out, but in the immediate future, communities are cut off and fishing seasons and summer economies will be disrupted, particularly in Prince William Sound with the current proposed schedule, emphasizing the broad economic impact the ferry system has on the state, if not the world, by allowing goods to flow in and out of these communities, was one point we tried to emphasize in the meetings, as well as the health and safety concerns related to not being able to travel freely and reliably. So with the number of people we had, we were able to split into 2 groups. Over 2 days, the group I was a part of met with representatives Lincoln, Rauscher, Newman, Josephson, Fields, Shaw, Sullivan Leonard, Knopp, Vance, Jackson. Also, Senators Giesel, the majority leader, and Senators Bishop and Hoffman. The whole group also met with Deputy Commissioner Soroki from Department of Transportation, as well as Ben Stevens, Chief of Staff for the Governor, and we testified in front of the House Transportation Committee meeting. We met with the Chief of Staff from Senator Sedman's office, and Representative Christ Tompkins came to sit in on the House Transportation Committee meeting, along with Representative Dan Ortez. It's clear this is a priority for them, which I was all grateful to hear. To summarize, I was encouraged by some conversations with legislators and by the coordination of AML that made this happen. Connections made with other community members reinforced how essential this kind of coordinated advocacy is. For next steps, I believe staying actively engaged in the conversation in Juneau wherever possible, testifying and letting the community know when their voices are needed, either at the LAO or in Juneau, is imperative. Our representation in Juneau is in a powerful position to advocate on our behalf. They need to continue to feel how important this is to us in the days ahead. So is there any questions on the Juneau trip? Yeah.
Any questions of Member Tremblay? Yeah. Member Lynn?
I got a question for you. If you read the Northern Economics report out there, was there any discussion about that report at that meeting at all?
We talked about it. People from different communities had their own respective issues. For example, they had the mayor of Haines wrong. They had populations of communities wrong in that report. So none of us were necessarily that impressed with what the report, when you're using wrong, it seemed like wrong data to talk about potentially privatizing the ferry service. We weren't that excited about its potential result. I haven't been able to go through the whole thing myself. We were talking about it in the preliminary organizing conference call with Nels, and apparently we came up in relationship with the Cake Road, but I haven't been able to detail more into it. So it was a thing people were talking about, but being released a few days before session meant that basically nobody had really read it. And then to be hearing from people in the smaller communities how inaccurate some of the stuff was rather troubling for all of us to hear too. So it's out there, and we're probably going to keep hearing about it, especially with the new group that's formed, but we'll see.
I've read the report. I don't think it did a very good job. One of the things it talked about, it never got to the fact, when you go back, the governor put a limit on you couldn't spend any more than $25 million to subsidize that ferry system, but the report itself never really addresses that. We have 30 to 50-year-old ferries, and there's nothing in the report that addresses how you're going to fix that problem, what you're going to do or so forth. So it's a really poor, in my opinion, it's really a poor report. It just doesn't address the facts of what we have to deal with.
Absolutely. The fact that it was based on kind of a flawed premise, seeming to be drawn almost out of nowhere, the almost $25 million cap, as it were, was, when that's the ostensive goal and is to prove that would make the system work, and then it didn't do that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions of Member Tremblay, your visit? Okay, thank you, Member Tremblay, for doing that. The next item on the agenda is the mayor's report.
No. Visitor industry.
PDC. Darn it, I was trying to jump through. Okay, Liz, you have a report? This is on the Visitor Industry Working Group update.
Sure, Mr. Mayor, just a brief update. The group met on January 24th, and they're reviewing the report and fine-tuning recommendations. They also had a discussion on making recommendations for possible uses of the marine passenger fee for this first year. They plan to meet one more time in mid-February, and I told them I was going to stamp final draft on the document that they review. So hopefully they'll feel comfortable with that and to release it to the PEDC, and that would be the next step.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this will be submitted to the PEDC. PEDC will look at it for a while, and then maybe for several weeks, and then they will give it to the Assembly to kind of look over. Is that how you envision the process of this working?
That's my presumption, is that PEDC is going to look at it and release it publicly.
They have one meeting a month, correct?
Right.
So, Member Mucci?
So they'll release it publicly, and then they'll, wait several weeks for comments, and then they'll give it to the Assembly?
You can take it, once it's public, so you take it as you want, I would assume, So if you want to submit comments back to the PEDC from it, that would be, I'm sure, welcome.
So I'm just trying to sort out how this is all going to work. So you're going to release it to the public and the Assembly at the same time?
That's my expectation, but it's going to be the board's decision on how it goes. I mean, my understanding is they're going to want to look at it, and they're going to release it and hope for comments back. If people think there are things that are missing or that we didn't, address something, then those would be really valuable, I think, to the group. And then that would go back to the working group, and then eventually a final version would go back to PDC. And we haven't really discussed what would happen at that point, but I assume then PDC would just put out a final version of the report.
Okay, Mr. Mayor. And so the final version of the report, my concern is that this group is going to get done with this document with recommendations of what to do with possibly some of the funds from the marine passenger fee. Do you think it's going to be possible that some of those recommendations could be implemented before the upcoming visitor season?
The ones from the fees or just in general?
The priority list that the Visitor Industry Working Group is hoping to forward to the Assembly.
In general, like just the recommendations that they have?
Yes.
Some of them are really simple and can be done really quick if we so choose. Some of them are a little bit complicated. Some of them are things that we could do tomorrow that would help, and some of them really are more geared towards, if we decided to grow the visitor industry, here's some things to think about, So there's a whole range of recommendations in there. So I could see certainly some things, especially the really easy ones, that could be done, in a day, if that was the direction that people wanted to go.
Okay. Any other questions of Liz on the Visitors Industry Working Group. All right, thank you. Now it's time for the mayor's report. If I get back to it here. We could drop off the first item. That was the welcome Governor Dunleavy, and like I said earlier, they're going to reschedule that, so we'll keep everybody informed on the timing on that. And we're seeking letters of interest. The Assembly is seeking letters of interest from Borough residents to serve on the Public Safety Advisory Board until October 2020 municipal election. And you could contact the Borough Clerk at the office in on Main Street, or you could email her at dthompson@petersburgak.gov. Next item on the mayor's report, Southeast Conference Mid-Session Summit. The Southeast Conference will hold its Mid-Session Summit in Juneau starting tomorrow and the following day. I was going to travel today, but I don't know if the plan would have made it anyway, but stayed in town for the governor's visit, but that didn't happen. I still may fly up tomorrow and make most of the meeting weather permitted. Alaska Municipal League is coming up in February, and Mayor Jensen, myself, Assembly Member Lynn, and possibly the Manager Giesbrecht. That's an action item later on the agenda since his travel is not funded yet. And I think it would be good if the manager can make it with us if he's not too busy with other duties. And we'll be traveling to Juneau for the AML Legislative Conference to be held the 18th to the 20th. And we'll talk about, is it on the agenda further down, Debbie, to talk about potential meeting changes?
No, it's only here.
Now we should talk about that. Will we have how many Assembly members will be available for the meeting that's scheduled for February 17th?
18th, because 17th is a holiday.
Okay, the 18th.
So it'll be a Tuesday meeting.
Evening meeting, right?
Correct, 6 p.m.
Make sure my brain's right.
You'll be there?
I'll be
So
here,
that's
yeah.
4. You might be crabbing?
I will be grabbing.
You will be crabbing. And member Lynn, you'll be at the AML, so that leaves 4. I'm wondering if it wouldn't be a good idea for someone to make a motion to maybe move that second February meeting till the 24th, the following week. I don't know what everybody else's schedule is, but I will be in town. Member Lynn, you will still be gone?
I'll be gone.
You'll be gone? I don't know what, you'll be here? How about everybody put their hand up that could be here on that meeting?
24th, you mean?
Yeah, so that leaves 5 of us.
I'm not sure if I'll be here, Mr. Mayor.
Pardon me?
I'm not sure if I'll be here.
Okay. So if we just want to leave it like it is, scheduled, we could see how it goes. What would the clerk recommend?
It's completely up to you guys. If you're okay with 4 people in seats and maybe the 2 of you that are gone could call in, that would give us 6
Right?
on the 18th.
I could possibly call in.
Okay.
So, okay, we'll leave that second meeting scheduled as is. Okay, item 6 on the mayor's report, discussion of subjects not on the agenda during a public meeting. Mayor Jensen and Clerk Thompson were both under the impression that Assembly members speaking on subjects not on an agenda under Assembly discussion items was a borderline violation of the Open Meetings Act, because the subject would not have been noticed to the public. At the last meeting, Clerk Thompson gave instructions to Assembly members who may have subjects they would like to discuss that were not added to the published agenda to make an amendment adding the subject to that agenda for the day under Agenda Item 4, Amendment and Approval of Meeting Agenda. It turns out discussion items not on the published agenda is not a violation of the Open Meetings Act. There is an action item under new business for the Assembly to determine how they want to handle these discussion topics in the future, so we can have more discussion at that time. Sorry for the confusion. And with that, if there's any, are there any questions, Assembly members, for me? So that brings us to the manager's report.
Thank you, sir. Public Works is continuing to be pretty busy with the after effects of our really cold weather. As services have been thawing out, we've found more and more water breaks. Lots of snow cleanup as well, and this will add to it. And they're continuing to work where needed to respond to the public's need as well as keeping the streets clean. Rockland Road was able to retrieve their grader that they got stuck at Papke's, and it's back in service. Temporary road repairs have been made to the driveway that was damaged, and the repaired area will be touched up once conditions allow for permanent repairs, probably in the spring. preliminary review of the sanitation proposed rate model is scheduled for this week on February 6th, so we'll know a little bit more about how that looks. Just real congratulations to a lot of folks, but the library's art education endowment received a major donation from John McCabe, who is the founder of the fund. The balance of the fund now exceeds $100,000, which is a significant milestone for the endowment. We're very overwhelmed with John's remarkable generosity and vision for arts education at the library. A portion of the annual interest earned by the endowment supports art education at the library. They cannot touch the principal, but the interest that comes off of that can be used for art education. We did some facility maintenance during the closure at the library. Kind of redid some DVDs and as they call it, weeding out books in the collection. Signage was updated. Mattingly Electric added some outlets and installed additional lighting in the women's restroom. And Rain Country Contracting performed maintenance on our mechanical systems, augured drains, and installed new flush valves on the toilets. Shalene is working on the provider's paperwork for a telehealth assessment capabilities from the state of Alaska. This will enable us to complete Medicaid assessments for our residents without having to take them to different locations. This will also enable us to collect revenue from the state for providing this service. The Swell LLC folks received preliminary approval for their low-income tax credits, subject to an environmental review of their site for the proposed housing project. So it seems to be moving along pretty well. I think they've got a couple of questions or issues on parking and another minor zoning thing that we'll have to work through. But so far, so good. Liz already talked about the Visitor Industry Working Group. Thanks to PEDC, they also submitted comments in response to the request for information on rural transportation projects and submitted comments in response to the proposed rulemaking regarding critical habitat designation for the Mexico DPS of humpback whale. So comments were added by PEDC and tagged on from what the borough had done. Mentioned earlier about Public Works, but also the water staff was kept pretty busy during the cold weather. Kind of a reach out to reminding homeowners that if it gets that cold, take precautions to protect your water lines and water meters to avoid stoppages in water service. Insulating piping, repairing skirting, and adding supplemental heat to crawl spaces can help to keep the water flowing. Even running a faucet, just the smallest amount during the coldest weather, will prevent a freeze-up. Big thanks to Justin Haley and his crew at Wastewater, who pitched in a lot with labor and equipment to research the leaks in the community pool, including cameras and all sorts of things that they did to help us. The draft design study report for the Pump Station 4 Force Main project was received from P&D engineers. We're providing a review, comments to the engineers, and working towards a direction for final design on the improvements. Bob talked about SEPA. So McMillan Jacobs, who is the engineer on the Blind Slough Hydro project engineering firm, has provided us with 60% drawings and specs for the hydro equipment procurement, as well as the construction contract. Staff met with engineers on January 23rd and 24th to review the project, the budget, and the scope of the work. Came in very, very expensive, so one of the problems was trying to go through it and figure out what we can change. John Heberling from Hiddle and Associates has provided a draft of the revenue requirements for Power and Light based on capital and operations plan. Mr. Heberling also continued forward and to work on the cost of service analysis. Progress is being made, and we hope to complete the study by the end of February. So some of that's in flux as we work with the engineer on the hydro project, because the cost of that will have a big impact on rates. So it's kind of a joint thing. Power and Light spent kind of the last week of January rolling out the trial phase of the Advanced Metering Infrastructure System, or AMI. This was rolled out in the North Harbor, Glo. Did I get that right?
All over the harbor.
All over the harbor. Okay, thank you. Various components were installed, including a trial run of electric meters, and training sessions were held with Power and Light and finance staff. As of the writing of this report, all is going smoothly, and it looks like the meters are communicating with the data collector as they should. Following initial training and gaining confidence in the system and software, the North Harbor will be fully upgraded to AMI meters. Additional harbors and other customers will be considered for inclusion in the AMI system expansions as future budgeting allows. This allows us to take readings without actually having to go out to a site, and saves a whole bunch of work for all sorts of different people, and should be a real benefit. For the month of January and February, Parks and Rec has been running the volleyball program with Coach Jamie Cabral and Christine Lynn, with 28 kids participating between 3rd and 8th grade. Stephanie has taken a bridge class for certification to teach American Red Cross babysitters training, and is currently instructing 7 young ladies in Girl Scout Troop 4065. Had a bit of a pool update. I mailed it out to you. As of this morning, the lap pool was at 81 degrees, the leisure pool at 91.5. Those are warm enough to swim in. Our challenge continues to be the pool deck, which is at 79.7, so it's a little cold for some of the little ones on the pool deck. Really will not be able to get that up until we get the repairs done to the HVAC system. We have reached out to both the school and Viking Swim Club and working on scheduling to get them back swimming if they in fact want to. I think Viking Swim Club will take us up on it. I'm not as sure about the school. You know, they're continue to be concerned about it being cold on the pool deck. Chlorine's good. In fact, probably a little high in the lap pool, but so getting people in there is probably not a bad thing. So anyway, and we have one leak in an air handling unit up that we've asked Fleet to see if they can come in and take a look at and see if they can do something with. So that's the quick pool update. Let's see. Thanks to Jim and his group and CCAD, we had a controlled delivery in Petersburg. This is where we track a package that we have some doubts about. Investigation is still ongoing, but resulted in the seizure of 114 grams of meth. Distribution charges are expected. So congratulations to Jim, his folks, and all of the various agencies that were involved in that. And we put this in here because I'm holding Jim to his word about adding a sergeant and cutting overtime, but we're looking at cutting 60 hours of scheduled overtime a month. This will change when you factor in sick, PTO, injuries, court training, and other factors, but we're seeing it go down as the other officers get in place. So that's it. Unless there's questions.
Any questions of the manager? Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So do you think the school will be in the pool this week? Do we have any indication that they will be in?
I don't know yet, sir. I think Viking Swim Club will be for sure.
Okay.
If the school is not in the pool, it's by their choice or by a regulation that I'm not aware of. 79 sounds pretty warm, but when the water's 81 and you're talking about little ones who have to get in and out of the pool, they get kind of cold.
Yep.
And we generally keep that building a lot warmer than 79. So that's the school's call.
Yep.
We'll stay out of that.
That's great. Thank you.
Any other questions of the manager's report? Okay, thank you, Steve. Okay, unfinished business. There's one item today, and it's an ordinance for second reading, and it's the ordinance 2020-01, an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code, Chapter 14.30, titled Mountain View Manor Elderly Housing and Assisted Living Facility, to increase assisted living rental and service rates and to add a new level 4 of assisted living care. And entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its second reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Lim. Is there any discussion? Member Stan Gregory.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is mainly for folks listening at home. If you're hearing about this new level 4 level of care, and Sheila, make sure you cut me off at any point if I speak inaccurately. This is a service really that her staff have been providing, but without being able to bill accordingly for it. So that's really, in a nutshell, what this is. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Member Stanton Gregory, for that comment. Is there any other discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 2020-01 passes unanimously in its second reading. There will be one more reading at the next meeting. Next item, item 15, it's new business. First item under new business is ordinance 2020-02. This is an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code, Chapter 14.20, titled Municipal Harbors, to add various rental, change, and cancellation fees. I'd entertain a motion to adopt this ordinance in its first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Stanton Gregory, I believe. Any discussion?
I said what?
Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just for the harbor master, has this ordinance gone to the harbor advisory board for?
Yes, we've been talking about it for a while, and under Steve's recommendation, especially the tour ship fee, cancellation fee, change fee, we went through the visitor industry group and just to get more feedback, and everybody was in favor of it. So
Great, thank you.
Any other discussion? Clerk, call the roll.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Okay, next item under new business is 20-056, and this is authorization to spend money at the swimming pool, and that's to replace and repair of aquatic center heat exchanger and air handler coils. And this total cost of these repairs replacement is $36,299.85. I would entertain a motion to approve the manager to move forward with this expenditure.
Second.
The Member Mucci make a motion, and seconded by Member Tremblay. Discussion. Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to get an explanation from Steve about what this is all about.
Go that again, I'm sorry.
Just an explanation of what these are for. Thank you.
They sound the same, but they're different. So you have HVAC, which is basically heat in the building, and it's a air-to-water system. So hot water is warm, water is heated in a boiler, goes through these coils, and heats the air around it, and that's what provides warm air for the building. During the freeze, many of these, there's two coils, they both develop leaks. The leaks have been repaired, which is how we have heat on in the building, but they're older units, and we're not sure how long they'll last. So this is ordering 2 brand new coils. They'll be installed. We will then take the old ones out, and if they can be repaired better when they're off the unit and offline, we will do that and use them as spares, since there's a fairly significant lead time on getting these things in. So that gives us, new ones in place, and 2 hopefully, or at least maybe 1 decent spare that can be used and traded out if necessary, something bad happens again. The other one is the water, so water-to-water heat exchanger. So again, water is heated in a boiler, and it then runs through these coils, and water is circulated around the coils, and that's what heats the water for the pool. Again, they're operating right now. Exact same issue. Significant numbers of leaks and some other corresponding damage on some end caps and such. All that will be replaced. We'll do the same exact thing. We'll have brand new coils in place. We'll have 2 extras that we'll pull out. We'll see if we can repair them and get them in good shape, and then they'll become potentially spares in the future. So kind of single source this because we were in a hurry, to be honest with you. We wanted to get this thing done. So we got Ketchikan Mechanical, who's familiar with the system, who flew over and met with staff, and we walked through all of this, got us the bids, and I was hoping for it being under my spending authority, but it was not. So that's why we're here today.
Member Lynn?
Steve, is that this expense within the budget we set up last year, or will this be in addition?
No, this will have to come out of our recommendation is take this out of the property development fund, and it is not a budgeted expense.
Thank you.
No.
Okay, Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Steve, when these units show up, do you expect to have the pools shut down?
No, we're going to swap them out. So Ketchikan Mechanical thinks what they can do, they're going to do this in the middle of the night. So they're going to be here 2 days. So one day they'll do one unit, the other they'll do the other, but they'll exchange out. They'll shut one coil line down, replace it, put it back in service, then do the other one, do the same on the other, on the heat exchange, on the heating system. So
Great.
if everything goes as planned, no one will know the difference other than the building will start to warm up a little bit. That's one of the reasons we can't keep the building warm, is the units that are in place now are not, they're not able to. So.
Okay, any other questions on this? Will the clerk call the roll?
Chelsea?
Yes?
Taylor?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, hopefully all the repairs go well and all the pool users will be happy and warm. Next item under new business is a letter to Senator Stedman and Representative Christ Tompkins regarding the Cake Access Road project. Assemblymember Michi requested a letter be drafted to Senator Stedman and Representative Christ Tompkins requesting explanation and information regarding the Cake Access Road project currently underway on Kupernoff Island. I'd entertain a motion to send a letter to Senator Stedman and Representative Tompkins.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made by Member Michi, seconded by Member Stanton Greger. Discussion. Member Trimbley.
Have we heard anything from DOT since about this project? Or
We did get a
information?
response. In fact, we sent the letter. The last meeting, we agreed to send a letter. We got a response from Greg Lockwood, I believe that's the correct name, and he called and asked what information we were looking for. And I said, well, I'm not really sure just what the project's all about, funding, et cetera. He said he didn't think he could make it to the meeting on the 3rd, and then he also corresponded with the clerk as well. He thought it was, his input in a meeting would be being able to tell us what they were building, what the bridges were going to look like, how they were designed, what the ramp would look like if there's going to be one boat launch, wherever the terminus is on the Petersburg end of this road. And that's, he said he would come at a future date if we asked him. Is that not correct?
Yes, he would, yes.
Yeah. So does that answer your question? That's the only communications I've had with him.
Yeah. I think it would make sense to me to share this letter, since it seems like our questions are ones that hopefully Stedman and Chris Tompkins can answer. But yeah, thank you.
Member Stan Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, what I heard from DOT was they can come down here and gladly talk technical aspects, but not philosophical aspects of the why, the broader stuff. So following that thread, I think it would be very prudent of us to get some input from Senator Stedman and Representative Christ Tompkins, because this is an issue that affects both people in Petersburg and Cake, and I think there's a wide range of opinions on this between the two communities, and having a more clear and direct, here's why this is important type conversation would be, it would make me feel better about this whole process, being able to speak with them about that, or at least hear from them about it. So I'll be voting yes on at least some version of this letter.
Member Norham.
Jay, pretty much it.
Okay. Member Lynn.
And we did receive a letter from Cake saying they're in favor of it. Am I correct?
Well,
Mayor?
we did not.
We received a copy of a letter that was sent to the governor's office and CC'd to Senator Stedman from the city of Cake, signed by the mayor of Cake, Lloyd Davis. And I believe the clerk forwarded all the assembly a copy of it.
But it wasn't a letter to us necessarily, but we have a copy of it, yes.
And
Forwarded that? Sorry, go ahead.
Member Lynn, you want to continue on your...
Yeah, on that train of thought. So in the second paragraph, that first statement is really not accurate, and there is a letter of support for that.
From one of the three government entities.
Right, I understand.
Yes.
And so to me, that this letter needs to be amended to be, I think, to reflect more accurate better accuracy of what we want. And I move that we just remove paragraph 2 and then send a letter.
Hang on one second, Member Tremblay. Member Tremblay?
Yeah, proposed language could be something about the $40 million being a substantial amount of money and considering current budget issues, and given the scope of the project, we're interested in public meetings. I was about to ask when the last public meeting on the Cake Access Road was in town.
I believe it was like 2014.
Okay, so I think it's past time at that point.
For part...
So paragraph 2, amending it to read...
Please be recognized by the chair so we can stay on track. Thank you. You have a proposed amendment? And Member Lynn, you were the one that... Okay, we have an amendment basically on the floor to remove the second paragraph of this letter. Let's get back up a little bit. Is there a second?
I'll second it for the sake of discussion.
Okay, all right. So a motion's been made by Member Lynn, seconded by Member Stanton Greger to remove the second paragraph of this letter. So Member Tremblay, you want to follow up on what your position on that amendment is?
Yeah, no opposition to that amendment.
Member Mucci.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to keep paragraph 2 in there and just remove the community of Cake. We do have this letter, and I think we should, chat about this letter. But I mean, still, the $40 million is an important thing, and Kupernoff, in Petersburg, we've heard from Kupernoff in the past, and I just, I think the paragraph is important. But if we remove Cake, we've addressed the letter from the city of Cake that they sent to the governor.
So I guess technically, would you like to make an amendment to the amendment? Not remove the whole paragraph and just remove the wording, we are unaware currently of any support from the communities of Cake. Community of Cake, or do you want to take Kupernoff out, or how are we going to do this? Is that how we should, remember, that's a little bit overanalyzing things?
May I make a suggestion?
Parliamentarian?
What if we were to say something along the lines of, we are aware of support for the project from the city of Cake, yet question whether using the blah, 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 blah. So I would change, we are currently unaware of any support for this project from the communities of Cake or Kupernoff, and instead I would say, we are aware of support for this project from the city of Cake, comma, yet, and then question whether using the $40 million, blah, blah, blah.
So I would have to ask the maker of the motion if he's all right with not removing the whole paragraph, because that's what we're discussing.
Yes.
Yeah, I would withdraw it to make a different
Will the
motion.
second be willing to as well?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we're back on discussing the letter as presented with a recommendation of removing the no support from Cake. Is that where we're at?
Mr. Mayor?
Member Stanton Greger, sorry.
It's all right.
Yeah.
With respect to Claire Thompson, I'm just going to think out loud here, because we're very clear Kupernoff wants nothing to do with this. There's no ambiguity to that. I would leave the Kupernoff part in there and just take the Cake one out, because we have one of 3 of the tribal entities speaking to it, not the whole show, because I've been toying around writing a resolution against the road, and I've been working with the president of Organized Village of Cake, so there's another entity that's not in favor of it. In short, I think it'd be cleaner to speak what we know for sure, and that's Kupernoff doesn't want it, and I would just clip Cake out from it. My 2 cents on it, if everyone's okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Member Mucci.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the amendment's a good start here. This letter we have from the city of Cake, even they have some questions about, they'd rather see it go to 5 Mile Creek, and they have concerns about the troopers responding to things that happen in Cake, and I'm not quite sure that the troopers are going to respond from here to drive to Cake. The emergency medevacs from Cake to Petersburg. I think there's some things that are assumed in this letter from the city of Cake to the governor that really aren't part of this road project. And the $40 million is there. I think it's a good reminder to folks that we are, the state's spending $40 million on a road that's really not going anywhere other to a boat ramp at 12 Mile Creek. So, yep, I'll be voting for the amendment.
Okay, any other Assembly members have comments? Okay, I'm going to interject my thoughts on this. I am not in favor of sending this letter as written, even if the word City of Cake being taken out of it. I don't like some of the language in it, of comparing this to a comment in the governor's State of the State address about needing to cut wasteful spending. I think this road would be an economic benefit to the region. Maybe not immediately, but I think there would be some economic benefits as soon as the road was put in. I can see, even if it's not open year-round, residents from Cake driving to the terminus near Petersburg, wherever that may be, and I would support their request for getting it as close to Petersburg as possible in a letter. I could see some of the local six-pack operators being able to set up a schedule potentially to go ferry people from the end of the road on this end to Petersburg to buy groceries and use other services that we can provide. I also see an ecotourism possibility for these six-pack or boat charter people to transfer people to the terminus at 5 Mile, 12 Mile, wherever it ends up, if it does end up being built, to take people camping and or hunting in the Cake area, or bring a vehicle over or have a vehicle there. I have spent the last 17 years in the Portage Bay drainage, 12-mile drainage where this road will drive through, hunting and recreating with my family and friends. And if I was selfish, I wouldn't want this road to go through because then there's going to be more people hunting in my area. That's not my area. In the area that I use, that's public area. I think there's benefits, many benefits, and I compare this road in a way to our road out Metcalf Highway that ends at Blackery Point and Banana Point. That could be deemed a road to nowhere. It goes to a boat launch. We go out there and Breakaway Charters comes and picks up people to go meet the plane in Wrangell if it overheads Petersburg or vice versa. Personally, I will not support this letter for those reasons. I think it's going to have economic benefit to the region. That's my input. So, Member Norham, do you want
to? Just real quick, I'm kind of supporting the road, but I still think we need to send the letter so they can at least come here and just explain it beyond DOT saying we're building a road and this is what the road is. That doesn't really explain anything. We're all aware of what roads are. But if these guys could just show up and be like, this is what we want the road for. If they're going to say, well, we're going to build this road so that all you guys can go hunting in Cake or duck hunting, moose hunting, whatever, or anything that you just said, cool, great, I like that. But sending a letter to ask them to explain what it is, I'm not seeing any harm in it.
Member Lynn.
I do have a problem with that paragraph too, is that if we want to send a letter and ask for information, ask them to make a presentation, that's one thing. To be able to, I'm not going to argue the 40 million, I'm not going to argue the other part of that. I don't think that's appropriate in a letter from us if we're just asking for information. So the letter as is, I can't support.
Member Morrell and then Member Tremblay.
I agree with Member Lynn on that one. I think it gives an opinion as opposed to just asking for information and a stance. So I can't support it unless we change it to just simply asking for information.
Member Tremblay.
I think the fact that the last meeting was 6 years ago is too long, so I would support making an amendment to remove paragraph 2 for the purpose of continuing community conversation. I think it's been way too long since we've had that opportunity for the community. I know it's one of those who's coming to talk to us, right? Who comes to talk to me are people pretty outraged that the project exists at all. I'm sure we all hear from different people. So I would like to make a motion to amend to remove the second paragraph for the purposes of sending it as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Okay, a motion's been made again to remove the second paragraph and by Member Tremblay, seconded by Member Stanton-Greger. Is there any discussion on that amendment? Member Stanton-Greger?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like I said earlier, just want some version of this to get out. Fine, second paragraph's gone. I thought Member Norheim phrased that very aptly. I thought you, Mr. Mayor, speaking to the topic was pretty on point for a lot of people's views, but again, I think it'll be really important to hear it from them. And asking the letter without paragraph 2 seems like a great way to do it. I'll be voting for the amendment.
Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm just, for me, I'm just trying to get a better understanding of why this road is so important to the people that fund this project, whether it's Senator Stedman and whoever, but, nobody, the last meeting we talked about sending the letters to DOT representatives, and, okay, that wasn't the best option. Those guys are just doing what they're told to do, and, they see the big picture, but if the DOT commissioner or Senator Stedman can explain that this is going to be an economic driver for the community, and it's going to bring jobs to the community, that'd be great. I could understand that, but it just seems really difficult to get somebody up the food chain to kind of help me understand what this is all about. I see that $40 million in there, and I see that as money that could have been spent for the ferry system. I mean, right now we don't have any boats sailing around, and I just don't understand it. I'm just trying to be patient, and I'm trying to have an explanation of why this is so important for Petersburg. I've been very patient, and I've talked to the proper people and I've tried to understand their wishes, but it just seems like this thing gets kicked down the road more, and it's just like my conversations with DOT said they would start this project in the spring if they could get it together, but they don't have it together. It'll start this summer, and before we jump off the cliff, I'd like Senator Stedman's office or somebody just to kind of explain to me why this is so important for Petersburg. I can't imagine that our friends and neighbors in Cake are going to be really excited about our friends and neighbor on Mitkoff Island driving over up into Kupanoff and going moose hunting. I just don't see that. But if somebody can explain to me that that's a good thing for the community of Cake, I'd be all for it. But I haven't heard it, and I'm just trying to sort out how I get the message.
So any other discussion on the amendment to remove the second paragraph? Clerk, call the roll.
Randy?
Yes.
Sorry. Mark?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Sure.
Taylor?
Yes.
Okay, the amendment to remove the second paragraph from this letter passes unanimously. And so that just, if the people are listening, that leaves the letter composed as such. The Petersburg Borough Assembly requests an explanation regarding the Cake Access Road project currently in progress. We have questions regarding the purpose of the road, the funding for the project, the plan for maintenance, etc. With the legislative session now underway, we understand traveling to Petersburg to have this discussion is probably not in the cards. We have an assembly meeting scheduled for Tuesday, February 18th at 6 p.m. and request to add the Cake Access Road project to the agenda, with you calling in for the discussion, you being either Senator Stedman or Representative Christ Tompkins. That is who the letter is addressed to. Please contact Clerk Thompson at her given address. If an alternate date or time is better for you, Clerk Thompson will handle the scheduling. Once we have a plan, we will invite Cake and Kupanoff residents to attend the meeting as well. So that's how it would be sent. But now, is there any discussion on the letter as amended? Member Tremblay.
Is it possible that we could CC this to both DOT as well as the governor's office? In my experience in Juneau recently, it seemed that they were pointing at each other to try to explain communications about DOT projects, specifically ferry and road stuff. And so if we communicate this, it's directed toward Senator Stedman and Representative Christ Tompkins, but if we kept the governor's office, I would like to keep the governor's office and DOT in conversation so that they understand that we are also trying to understand and get more information, the better. More people at the table, the better.
I wouldn't be opposed personally to the letter being sent to the governor's office and Commissioner McKinnon.
Okay.
Shall we add that to this letter? Is that, all those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, that's unanimous to send it to the two other people. So that's the letter as amended. Is there any other discussion on the amended letter? Will the clerk call the roll?
Chelsea?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so the amended letter passes unanimously, and we will have the clerk rewrite that, and I will sign it, and we will get it sent off. Okay, assembly discussion items and the agenda. I touched on this a little bit in the mayor's report. I don't know how we're going to make a motion to do this. Member Stan Greger, do you have a way to make a motion to move forward on this?
Perhaps, Mr. Mayor, I'll give it a shot. I would move that we instruct Clerk Thompson to take option number 2, to create a sub-agenda item under assembly discussion items similar to recognitions called assembly member comments. It would be on every agenda to provide for a place for assembly member comments on any subject.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, that motion was made by Member Stanton Greger and seconded by Member Tremblay and Member Morrell as well. So that brings us to discussion on this. Member Stanton Greger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Of the two of these, this seems cleaner to me. If we have a full house and people really wanted to talk about a topic, give us a venue to do it, or not. But either way, the way it has been, if people really wanted to reach out to us, have communications, but there's no real forum for that. We've gone through more contentious things like during the budget cycle, recycling, et cetera, where I know I've wanted to comment on something or respond to some things people have brought up, and I have to wait for them after the meeting to try to hope they stay and catch up with them and give them my 2 cents. In short, I think this is the cleaner way to engage with the public on topics that are important to them. That is all.
So you're with this second option that we're discussing, assembly member comments, that would be on every agenda to provide for a place for assembly member comments on any subject, but that still wouldn't provide a back and forth between people in the audience?
No, not a back, sorry, Matt.
Okay, yeah.
No, not a back and forth, but potentially a response,
To their, even earlier in the meeting.
Yep, exactly.
Views related or unrelated to the agenda.
I could say, to speak to so-and-so that spoke earlier, and whatever.
Got your train of thought. Member Lynn.
Yeah, I'm trying to sort this out myself. So you're saying if we have a room full of folks, and you feel that you need to make a response, then you would not have to go back and amend it. Since this would be on there, you could already respond to whatever comments was or ask for future action? Is that your thinking?
I don't know about future action, but to be able to speak to, and we've all sat during a meeting like, I wish I could respond to this person, and maybe they leave before the end. At least that way it's heard on the record, maybe a point of clarification or any kind of acknowledgement. I think it can feel lonely in the audience sometimes, wondering if we have any real opinion on the feedback given, and that gives us a forum to either voice that or not. There's no requirements. That time gets filled, and just give a venue for it. If that clarifies it all for you, Member Lynn.
I'm maybe my own thought process is confused.
Clerk Thompson might be able to clarify. She had the discussion with Attorney Heidemann. Did you and the attorney discuss this and come up with this suggestion?
We did. So speaking on subjects under discussion items currently that are not on the agenda is not a violation of the Open Meetings Act. It can happen, and that's just the way it is. Although she did feel that it was probably a decent policy for us not to do that because the public wouldn't necessarily know that we were going to talk about those things under discussion items. So she felt, she also noticed that on the agenda there is place for the public to give their comments, but there's really no place for the assembly to give comments. And so she thought that if we use it as a sub-item under discussion items like recognitions that will be there on every single agenda, then the public basically is noticed that under that discussion item, the assembly members may discuss whatever they want to, and if they're worried about that, then they need to stay tuned until that happens. So it made sense to me. We're noticing it, even though it's not a specific notice, but it's a notice that the assembly may discuss whatever it is they want to discuss under that item. So if the public is interested in that discussion, they should either tune in on the radio, be in the audience.
Okay, does that clarify your question, Member Lynn?
I think so.
Okay. Member Tremblay? Yeah, I saw you.
Yeah, I think, well, because I think I wanted to respond. I think some of the confusion, for me, I really like this idea because people speak after we've approved the agenda. So it's impossible right now to add something to the discussion based on what people have brought up to us. So I think this is a really great way to reflect back what we've heard, and I see it as a potential way to preview what has come up either through those comments or through our own discussion up here, potential items for the next agenda, and then that creates a little bit more of a feedback loop of, hey, I'm thinking about bringing up this at the next meeting, but not necessarily in a, we need to hash it out right now. I think that's definitely worth having it be on the agenda, but it's a way of giving the clerk a heads up that we might want that, and the public as well, to keep the conversation flowing a little bit. So to me, that's why this option makes sense, having it be just kind of a consistent, again, not necessarily used all the time, but just a way to keep that flow going a little bit more.
Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just so I understand the mechanics of this, so we'll have people speaking, requesting to be heard related to unrelated to agenda items. And so after we've heard those comments, then towards the end of the meeting, we'll be able to respond or ask questions of those people to help us understand their views.
I don't think it's intended to be a question or a discussion back and forth.
Okay, no.
I mean, I agree with what Member Tremblay was just saying. We'll see if the rest of the assembly agrees, but it wouldn't be an action item. It would be something where if something pops into your mind during the meeting or during the people's testimonies, you could bring it up as an assembly member and, like Member Tremblay said, say you intend to put it on a future agenda. That's what I foresee. Member Mucci, does that, you have one other question?
No.
Any other discussion? And this is all being discussed because of the last meeting when I suggested that, things have to be, the agenda has to be amended before discussion items. And like the clarification on that from our attorney was no, it doesn't have to. I still think, personally, it's a good idea to say you're going to put it on the agenda so the public knows you're going to discuss a topic. And then now that we have this other potential avenue to voice our opinions. I have one question. This doesn't need to go, changing the agenda format doesn't have to go to any of a vote other than us.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Don't want to be wrong again. So, well, that's not going to happen. Okay, with that being said, the motion is to add the second idea that Clerk Thompson has and add something on the agenda that gives the assembly members time to comment. So, the clerk call the roll.
Jeff?
Yes.
Dang it. Jay?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yeah.
Brandy?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next item is travel authorization for Manager Giesbrick to attend the Alaska Municipal League Winter Legislative Conference. I and Manager Giesbrick are requesting approval for Manager Giesbrick to attend the Alaska Municipal League Winter Legislative Conference in June, February 18th through the 20th. This travel is not budgeted, so we need approval from the Assembly, and I'd entertain a motion to approve that expenditure.
Second.
A motion made by Member Mucci, seconded by Member Lynn. Is there any discussion on this?
Just a point is that part of my travel is being paid for, so we aren't totally adding a whole new person. We're adding part of it because part of my travel is paid for by SEPA for another business trip.
Perfect. And we do have plenty of money in the travel budget, I believe.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so. And the manager's not sure if he'll be able to make the trip, but we still have to approve the expenditure. That's why it's on this agenda. So, clerk call the roll.
Taylor?
Yes.
Chelsea?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Brandy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to item 16, communications. Are there any communications anybody would like to put forward? Seeing none, assembly discussion items. We've added 2 more, B and C, to this, but the first discussion item is A, and it is, excuse me very much, Assembly members Len and Mucci requested this discussion item, and it comes with homework. And the Borough Manager goals and objectives for 2019-20 budget year, the Assembly tasked Manager Giesbrick with the following. Goal 12, encourage PEDC and the Chamber to develop a credible, focused plan to encourage new business, including non-fisheries related businesses. Goal 13 was encourage PEDC and the Chamber to develop a marketing plan to let the outside world know about our high quality of life and welcoming business climate. So Manager Giesbrick worked with PEDC on a matrix that could be developed toward a more focused and actionable plan. The matrix is attached to this agenda. In the memo, also attached, PEDC asked the following questions. What is the Assembly's intent of marketing our community? Is it to increase our visitor traffic, etc.? And PEDC respectfully requests the Assembly engage in an honest conversation to determine its support for economic development and the expected change it will bring to our community. So these are topics we've talked about in the past, and members Len and Mucci request the Assembly study the matrix provided and select their top 5 goals by the 10th of February to discuss at the next meeting. So with that being said, Member Mucci, Member Len, do you have any input?
Yeah, mostly for the public's on this, is that Manager through PEDC has given us back a list of about 4 pages of different ideas that we could take on as to look at developing new businesses or expanding something or changing some things. And in all fairness to the manager, we've had this for approximately 2 months, and so looking at it, what we were trying to do is to say, do we want to proceed with this since we gave this as a goal to the manager, or do we want to, or some part of it, or one item? A couple ideas here. One, the manager has told us that he doesn't. There's approximately 20 or 30 items on here, and the manager comes back and he says, "There's no way we could take all these on, even if we wanted to." And our idea is to take, I think Member Mucci and I would like to winnow this down to 1 or 2 items that are really important to all of us. And we were trying to figure out, we were trying to figure out a way to winnow this down, so to speak. And so what we're asking the Assembly here to do is to take a look at the items, particularly on the left-hand side of the page, and see which 5 would be most important for you to take on, that you feel would gain us the most in terms of economic development, or if the mark was missed at all, add another item and put that as one of your 5. And so what we're asking you for the next meeting is to pick your top 5 or add 2 or change something, and then send that to the clerk. And then she, and I believe, or probably Liz, will probably end up doing it, but to comparing all of ours and then picking the top 2 or 3 that are most important. And with that, I think Jeff has a question, so I'll turn it over to him.
Member Mucci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yep, I agree with Bob. We've all looked at this list over the last probably a year and a half, and there's some of them that are the real big pictures and some that are more focused. And I think the idea is not to get lost in the 3 columns on the right-hand side of the page, but just look at the goals and pick your top 5, send them to Debbie, and Debbie will make a list and we'll come up with 2 or 3 for Steve to work on. I mean, I know Steve's got a lot of stuff on his plate, but for me, it's when PEDC or Steve has a question for the Assembly and we're trying to continue to give him direction, I think we need to make sure those questions get answered. So, these are all things that we've wanted him to look at. Some are easier to deal with. Some are, you probably won't spend much time on them. There's one in here, and working with the Forest Service and stuff, we do that. But there's other stuff that are farther on in the last 3rd and 4th page that might have some real possibilities to happen here in Petersburg. So, yeah, the idea is to go through and you could probably, what would be best, just to mark on these sheets and scan them to you and come up with a list?
That would be fine. I'll take it however you want to send it to me, via email, or just bring your papers into me. When marked would be fine. I do wonder, with the mayor and Assemblymember Lynn and the manager being gone at the next meeting, being out of town, so...
Member Norheim.
And Member Norheim, thank you. Should we maybe postpone this action item to the first meeting in March?
Mr. Mayor?
And this is Member Mucci.
Sure, it could be thank you, Mr. Mayor. It could be an action item on the first meeting in March, but it would be nice to have it all compiled by this date on whatever date we had down here.
I gave you the deadline for the next
February
agenda,
10th.
which was February 10th.
So if you had that, then you could at least start sorting stuff out, and if you were able to come up with 2 or 3 items and pass those off to Liz to see if there's more clarification that might be needed, that would still give us another 2 weeks to kind of fine-tune that list and kind of have something for us to talk at the first meeting in March.
Member Lynn.
Yeah, I think our thinking was at the time that if we got that back, we could sit down and put it together in such a way that we could bring it back to the Assembly as an action item in one form or another, but it may take some additional work. That was my thought process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Member Stan Gregor.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just some thanks to both Bob and Jeff for coming up with this format. We talked about this, I think, a meeting or two ago about how we wanted to go about it, and kind of turning us all loose on our own to, line out our priorities and have the clerk go over it. This, even though it'll take some good homework, it's, I think, the most efficient way to go about this. So thanks, you guys, for coming up with a way that will be doable, I guess.
And then with us going through this matrix, this list of different ideas, we're going to go through it, and in the meantime, we're still waiting for the visitors working group to come forward with their ideas, so that could throw a whole nother part in the matrix, is one of my thoughts. No, I mean, what they suggest as far as the tourism business, I'm just trying to wrap my head around what we're doing. I mean, I know what we're asked to do is pick our 5 priorities out of this list. But then if we get something new submitted to us,
I didn't see it that way. I'm not arguing. What I'm saying is that report was going to come forward regardless, and what we would need to, and I believe we need to deal with that also, and it may not be one of those, I visualize when we're done with this, we're only going to have 2 or 3 items that are really, we can really tackle. And we're going to have to deal with the other report, maybe separately, or maybe it'll be dovetailed in. But I still think we need to look. There's a whole bunch of items on here that are separate from what the tourism report is. Right. And we'd like to see, where everybody's at and what we see as economic development.
For the future in Petersburg.
Exactly.
Member Tremblay?
I think them coming out at around the same time or talking about them at around the same time is actually really great, because the visitor industry, as someone who's been on with the meetings and part of that task force for this past year or so, that is something that probably every single one of these items under the strategy moments could have had 20 plus people getting together regularly over the course of a year to really work through all the details. So that task force meeting for that long, doing that work, basically was a attempt at that question, right? And so it's pretty nice to be dealing with both at the same time in a way, just because you can see a lot of what the the line between what we want to see but then what our role actually is, or what the PDC role actually is, are 2 different things. And so that's a lot of what the visitor industry meeting was, not to get ahead of the final report, but it's basically a, hey, this would be a great idea if somebody wanted to do it kind of conversation, whereas this is the more structural, what can we at this level do to forward this or raise up that platform in that way. So having the various scale, scope projects happening in same conversations is kind of, I see it as kind of nice. It shows just how much work is really necessary with them all, and it'll be a yes and conversation for sure, because it's also about who who wants to partner with us, who we want to have develop that relationship with, right? So
in the end result, we come up with, compile all our best thoughts, or whatever you want to call them, working group's thoughts. Before we take any action on it, giving the manager direction, is there public comment again? Or do we just, this is our recommendation, manager move forward, and these are the ideas we want to see in Petersburg? I mean, I guess that's what the visitor working group has been doing. They've had public meetings, they've been advertised, we have had, I don't know how much public input there was. I didn't attend any of them, but remember Stan Gregor? I might be overthinking it here.
Perhaps, but either way, it's all good. That's what we're doing. I mean, if we're sitting here in a meeting and saying, okay, this is all compiled as a discussion topic, it means it'll be open to the public to come in and comment and saying, hey, I disagree with, don't give the manager this direction or what have you. I think it'd be kind of wired into the process, if that makes sense.
Okay. It will, if we discussed at a meeting, we'll have public comments available. Member Mucci?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the way I understand it is that these 4 or 5 pages of goals and strategy is the big picture for Steve. The visitor industry working group is a more focused project to try and identify some of the needs, the wants and needs that we've heard addressed by the community, and maybe the way to move forward on just the visitor industry. And so I'm kind of thinking, if I'm wrong with this, somebody let me know, but I think this is the document here we have with us is the big picture for Steve. The visitor industry working group is focused at the visitor industry.
Yes.
Okay, so member manager, you have some going to get directed.
This is just so I'm not remiss, and it's an important statement that Liz made, not that long ago, which is many of these come right out of the comprehensive plan that the borough spent a lot of money on developing. So, for those of you who want even more detail, feel free to read the comp plan. It's a really big, thick document. But many of these, again, this is the focus of the comp plan in this area. So that's it. Everything else sounds fine.
Okay, so we'll see how it moves forward. I'm probably making it more confusing than it is. Okay, so we have 2 other items. If that discussion item's over, B is the Point Frederick East update. I know the clerk was going to give us some, Member Mucci, what's this discussion about?
Mr. Mayor, I'll just start. We've had a lot of discussion at the beginning of every meeting by Mrs. Woodworth, and she's contacted all of us about changes to property taxes and, mill rates and stuff. And, I understand that, but there's a bunch of other things that are going on within the borough that we're trying to get squared away first. I understand the need to kind of look at that Frederick Point East and what's going on at Pappy's. I understand that, but I don't want people to think that I'm just kind of pushing it down the road. I'm just struggling to keep everything moving forward. But maybe if Debbie had something else to add, that would be helpful.
There has to be a set protocol.
Process. There is.
We have to follow. And is that what we're trying to get, right?
It is, yes.
So we can compile that and provide it to the public.
Correct.
Mrs. Woodworth, et cetera.
That's correct. And it is in process. I right now am the stopping block because I haven't had the time to go through the 1970s ordinances as the attorney has asked me to do. So there is a draft ordinance in place. I just need to do a little more research. I need the time to do that. I also have PMEA negotiations coming up that I must get prepared for, along with all the everyday stuff. So anyway, it's on my desk. I look at it every day. I'm going to get to it as soon as I can, and as soon as possible, be bringing an ordinance forward to you guys, which will basically say, start the process. It will give if approved, it will start the process of getting the question of removing Frederick Point East from Service Area 1 on a ballot. And it'll have to be on 2 separate ballots. It will have to be on a ballot for the people that actually reside all the time at Frederick Point East, and then it will have to be on a ballot for all those inside Service Area 1. So it's a process, and we're working toward it, and I won't forget about it. It will come before you soon.
Well, you just laid out the procedure process to follow. Perfect. Any other discussion on Point Frederick East? And Member Tremblay added a visit from Representative Jonathan Christ Tompkins, I believe.
Yes, which I was just checking the status of, and apparently a de-icing truck is broken, so he will not be able to make it into town. It would be a really convenient time of year to have a reliable statewide transportation system. So unfortunately, that will not be happening this evening, but that was the goal as of 2 hours ago. But
Okay, well, thanks for the update. Just like the rest of the delegation or officials that were going to try to make it, they can't, and they're flying on their own plane, so. Seeing no other discussion items or anything else on the agenda, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Aye.